Okay, so what we're diving into today, it isn't a myth and it's not a legend. We're talking about a claimed eyewitness account from early 20th century China, an inside look at the underworld's justice system, told by a man who said he was literally a judge there. Yeah, I know. It sounds absolutely wild, right? But the account we're looking at presents this as a completely factual report from a man who is basically living two lives, one by day here with the living, and another by night presiding over the souls of the dead. So, who is this man at the heart of such an incredible story? Let's meet him. And there he is, Li Shu. I love that quote. He frames this whole unbelievable experience not as some supernatural fantasy, but just another day at the office. To him, it wasn't strange at all. It was his job. So who exactly was this guy, and how in the world did he supposedly end up as a judge for the dead? All right, first things first, let's talk about the man himself, because this is really important. To get a handle on his story, you have to understand he wasn't, some mystic living in a cave. This was a respected, professional man of the law in the real world. So you've got this incredible double life, right? By day, he's a legal expert, but by night, he said he was whisked away to hand out a totally different kind of justice. And the craziest part, this whole thing supposedly started when he was just a kid, a teenager. So picture this. It's around the year 1900. Li Shu is 19 years old, and one night, this figure in ancient clothing shows up in his dream and basically offers him a job. He thinks, hey, it's just a dream, so he agrees. Well, soon after, a ghostly carriage pulls up to take him to work. And for the next 4 or 5 years, this became his routine. Every single night, his soul would journey to the underworld court while his body was just out cold in a deep sleep. Okay, so the big question, right? Why him? Why pick a 19-year-old for this massive responsibility? Well, according to his new, otherworldly colleagues, it wasn't random at all. They told him he was chosen because he'd done this before, in a past life. He was apparently a judge in that exact same court. Talk about a karmic job offer. So he's in. He's got the job. But what was it actually like? What did this underworld court look like? How did it even work? You might be picturing chaos, but Li Shu describes something surprisingly organized, almost bureaucratic. Yeah, this wasn't just one guy banging a gavel in a room full of ghosts. No. There was a whole structure, a real hierarchy. Li Shu himself was a branch court chief, which is basically the presiding judge. He had 4 assessors helping him out with the cases, and then you had the bailiffs, countless ghost soldiers making sure orders were followed. And way up top, there was a big boss, a superior named Dong Yu, who Li Shu reported to, but interestingly, never actually met face to face. And the way the court ran was super specific too. His branch handled souls from 5 whole provinces in North China, and they only dealt with cases in the first 10 months after someone died. Then they'd get passed on. The whole process, even the clothes they wore, was modeled on the Qing dynasty government, the one in the living world at the time. But here's the part that really gets me. There were no law books. None. Judgments weren't about legal technicalities. They were based on something way deeper, a direct, intuitive grasp of a soul's karma. So if you don't have written laws, how do you decide what's just? Well, the whole system, top to bottom, was apparently built on this perfect, totally transparent record-keeping of karma. According to Li Shu, you couldn't hide a thing. I mean, nothing. The spirits and gods in the underworld could see and hear literally everything a person did or even thought. A person's entire moral history was right there for everyone to see, visible as a colored aura around their head. Red, white, or yellow meant you were good. A black aura? Well, that meant you were in trouble. The soul itself was all the evidence they needed. So with this intense focus on karma, you get a pretty clear idea of what they valued. On the one hand, the absolute best things you could do were to show loyalty and filial piety, that deep respect for your parents and elders. That stuff could actually get you a lighter sentence for other bad deeds. But on the other side of the coin, the things they hated most were promiscuity and the number one worst sin, taking a life. But don't get the wrong idea. This wasn't some simple black and white system. It wasn't just, you did this, so you get this punishment. No, context was absolutely everything. Tick stealing, for example. Li Shu said that if you stole because you were starving just to survive, that was a pretty minor offense. But if you stole money that was meant for medicine and because of that someone died, Well, that same act of theft becomes a massive, grave crime. It's all about the motive and the consequences. Okay, to really bring this to life, Li Shu actually wrote down some of the cases he presided over. Let's walk through one of the most fascinating ones, because it really shows you just how complex and nuanced these judgments could get.
So get this. A ghost is brought into the courtroom, and his sins are described as being piled like a mountain. I mean, this guy's bad news. But just as the trial's about to start, he begins chanting the Diamond Sutra, a really sacred Buddhist text, and suddenly, this holy light appears over his head. The assessors just stop everything. They're like, nope, we can't prosecute a soul that's showing the light of Buddha. So now they have a huge problem, right? His sins are real, but so is his spiritual achievement. What do you do? The verdict they came up with was brilliant. They sentenced him to be reincarnated into a bunch of short-lived bodies, one after another, just long enough for him to forget the sutra. Then, once that good karma was used up, he'd be brought back to finally be judged for all his original crimes. See? Both the good and the bad had to be accounted for.
Okay, so that's the courtroom. But what about life outside of it? What was the day-to-day, or night-to-night, I guess? What was it like for the souls just existing in this realm? Li Shu gives us a really interesting look into the underworld environment. He described the Netherworld as this place that was always dim, like a really foggy day or right at twilight. No sun, no moon, no stars. But there were streets and little shops where they used that paper money that living relatives burn for the dead. The spirits didn't really eat, they just sort of absorbed the essence of food. And they didn't sleep, they just kind of rested by leaning on things. And yeah, they had fears. They were afraid of really righteous living people, loud noises like firecrackers, and especially the coming of dawn in our world, which apparently felt like a scorching heat to them. And here's a detail that's pretty haunting. He said that most ghosts looked exactly the way they did at the very moment they died. Their appearance was just frozen in time. They didn't age. So a soul who died in battle would still bear the marks of their wounds. All right, so after all the trials and the waiting, what was the end goal? What was the final destination for these souls? What was the whole point of this massive cosmic system? Well, for most souls, the vast majority of them, the whole journey ended with one thing: reincarnation. They'd get sent back to the world of the living to start a new life. And of course, the kind of life they got was completely determined by the karma they'd built up in their last one. But it wasn't the same for everyone. Li Shu saw basically three different paths. First, you had the truly great spiritual practitioners, people with immense virtue. They didn't even show up in his court. They just ascended straight to heavenly realms. Then you had the ordinary souls, that was his main clientele, who were judged and then waited for reincarnation. But here's a really strange observation he made. He never ever saw any ghosts from before the Song dynasty, which was like centuries and centuries ago. That made him think that maybe, just maybe, souls that don't get reincarnated eventually just sort of dissipate, fade away over a very, very long time. So look, whether you take Li Shu's story as literal truth, or maybe a deep metaphor, or something in between, it leaves you with this really powerful thought. The whole idea is about total accountability, a world where nothing gets missed and every single choice you make matters. So kind of leaves us with a pretty simple but huge question. If you knew for a fact that every action, every word, even every thought was being perfectly recorded for some future review, how would that change the way you live your life, starting today?